Well, good morning, everybody. I think we're going to start, and as people come in, they can just join in on the conversation and Jabu's talk for the morning. Please remember that we are recording this morning, so if you do miss anything or you want to go back and go and listen to the talk again, you just have to log on to the Business Engage YouTube channel, and all the recordings of the sessions are there. Welcome to everybody. Welcome to Jabu for joining us this morning. It's our monthly BoardWalk that we are hosting, and we're excited to have Jabu with us here this morning. So as you all know, we don't go through lengthy introductions to the speakers. You've all been sent his bio. But I think Jabu comes with a wealth of experience in terms of mindset development, in terms of all the work he's doing in that regard. He's a keynote speaker, an executive coach, a facilitator, and he really specializes in mindset development. He's the founder of the Mindset Development Institute, and he's going to be talking to you this morning about the 5 invisible C's of high performance. Jabu, can I hand over to you?
Yes, it's really great to be here. Can everybody hear me? Am I audible?
We can. And Jabu, can I just ask that whoever can put your cameras on? I don't think Jabu wants to be speaking to a number of circles. So whoever can, please put your cameras on.
Yes, that would be
Thanks,
extremely helpful. That would be very helpful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for this wonderful privilege to be spending time just with so many of you in this cold Joburg morning. I don't know where everybody's coming from across the country, but it's a bit chilly here in Joburg. And yes, as Colleen has already mentioned, I am a mindset development specialist. I normally describe mindsets in this way, that they are categories of thinking that lead to a specific outcome. Structured categories of thinking that lead to a specific outcome. And so as a specialist, then it means my job is to understand those structures of categories of thinking that lead to specific outcomes in people's lives. Because we all know that actions do lead to certain outcomes, and some of us are not entirely always aware of what informs those actions, and we always surprised, right? We get surprised at the outcomes. Hey, look at me! I did something amazing. How did I do that? I have no idea. Oh, look at me! I've done something terrible, and I keep on doing it. How do I do that? I have no idea. And so that's pretty much then what I spend most of my time doing, is sitting down, just thinking around what leads to me doing the things that I am doing. And I'll share with you a little bit of a story. So for me, it starts off quite some time back, where at the age of 37, I found myself literally having to start over. I found myself having to ask myself, with 3 children, 2 boys and a girl has got special needs, and I find myself as a single parent having to raise 3 children. And I find myself without a job after having gone through more than 100 different, or after having applied for over 150 jobs and having gone to over 20 different interviews. Great, right? I've had these interviews, and then a positive, amazing outcome. Amazing feedback. Oh, we'll give you a call back. Don't call us. We'll call you. And then you wait for that call, and then it's just silent. And then no call is coming through, except a couple of except a couple of telesales trying to sell you something. And I had to sit down and ask myself, how do I find myself here? It's different when I was still younger, when I could take the risk, but now there's 3 innocent children depending on me. And that's how he started. I realized, because of being a pastor prior to that for about 10 years, that there was perhaps a misconception or a lack of understanding why is it my skills are actually relevant to the corporate sector. I realized that most of these corporates don't know that, understand that their people come to me and tell me all of their secrets. They tell me who they're unhappy about. They tell me why they're unhappy about them. And they speak to me freely in a safe space. And so I have quite a bit of a better understanding of what actually is needed. And then I realized at that time, though, I needed to also understand what makes me valuable. How do I package the knowledge that I have in such a way that they can understand it? I I like to use the word palette because a palette is so subjective and it is so unique to all of us. So how do I package my information to suit their corporate palette? And then I realized at that moment that, okay, most of our struggles as human beings and the people that come into my counseling room as a pastor, and also even for me, is in thinking. The way we think, what we think, how we think, what we think things mean has got a massive determining factor of how we experience things. And then that's where the whole journey came from. And then I started the Institute, put together a couple of courses, developed many different frameworks that I normally use to counsel people to get them through hard times. And I then put that together to suit the corporate palette. And then that's how the Institute started. And then I moved then from being unemployed for more than 2 years and now having been in the corporate sector now for the last 4 to 5 years. And at the moment, I'm the vice president of the Association of South Africa. And also recently just started the African Business Leaders Club, which is literally a club of many affluent or many successful African business leaders and business owners. And we're creating this ecosystem that's a landing page for business opportunities coming from outside of the country. Because thankfully, when I used to travel and as a pastor and even now as a coach and as a speaker, you get to these countries, people want to come to South Africa to come and do business, but they don't know which companies to do business with. They don't know who to trust. And quite a few of them have lost money. So with that idea to put that together. And so I'm constantly in this mode of looking at the environment that I'm in as a South African with all the challenges that we've got and asking myself, how do we solve these problems? What makes it harder for us to implement some of the very good solutions we've got? And even though we may have sometimes the most elaborate, the most incredible plans, we can still find ourselves failing to implement them because we don't understand what makes it harder for us. And I want us to think about that. The reason for the title is about the invisible C's. It's about something that is invisible that makes you perform at a high level or succeed at a high level. Now, let's think about it in this way. There are the visible elements, which are quite simple. The visible elements have to do with, okay, fine, there's a purpose that we got to achieve. We're starting a company or we're in a company, we're a corporate. We've all got job descriptions. We've all have a bunch of activities that we've got to do. And those activities then determine the abilities that we've got to have. So the first visible element of performance or of starting success is the abilities, which are the activities that need to perform to fulfill a particular task or to achieve a particular purpose. So that's the what, that's the abilities. And then the second one then is the capacity, which is how much. First one is ability. What do I need to do? Capacity. How much of what I need to do I need to do? So that then becomes the measurable elements. Those will then be your KPIs, right? How long, and then if you are, for example, in the call center environment, how many calls you got to do? If you are starting a business, how much money do you have to make to be profitable? The third thing then is competence, which is about how well can you do what you say you can do, right? Then you take that, we're looking at the proficiency levels, your level of skill. And then the fourth one, which has different elements to it, and I'm still on the visible element. And then this one is about fitness. Now, I'm somebody who's very physically active. I actually am involved in physical training every now and then. I'm into sports. And I learned 5 crucial elements about this fourth thing that is visible, and that is fitness. And the 5 crucial elements to the fitness. The first one is the energy. Whenever you're doing whatever you're doing it very well, you're doing it a lot of it, but what is your level of energy? Because your energy then determines the second part, which then will be endurance. All right. How long can you endure doing the same thing? We have a pandemic right now of mental wellness. And is that many of us now really cannot endure any longer some of the things that we used to do. They're hard on our physiology. We're having all kinds of illnesses because of our things. Although they may still have a degree of energy, but they can no longer endure the capacity or the burden that we have been putting ourselves under. And the third element of fitness is flexibility. Whilst under pressure, are you able to stretch yourself? Are you able to stretch yourself and to achieve a bit more under pressure? And then the fourth one is agility, which is then your ability to handle emergencies. If there's any sudden emergency, do you have the financial agility, the physical agility, the emotional agility, the mental agility to handle any emergencies? After COVID-19, so many of us have find it extremely difficult because we have been stretched to capacity. And when you are stretched to capacity, your agility is not so good. Financially, physically, spiritually, mentally, it's not so good. And then the last one, and I'm actually busy building a talk on this one, I think for me is so crucial, is adaptability. Adaptability. In this changing environment, are you adapting to the change? You know, because I think it was Matt Walsh, no, not Matt Walsh, the other Walsh, the business. I've got Matt Walsh because I've been listening to his podcasts. He said that if the change that is happening out, yes, that's the one, Jack Walsh. If the change that's happening outside is faster and greater than the change that is happening within, then you are going to fall behind. And we know this, right? I mean, you know, Gallup does that, those studies, and one of the studies that Gallup does is looking at the change or the rate of change. And it was, I think it was in 17 rather, where they came out with this study that said that when they looked at all the information that has been generated in the world from the very beginning up until 2017, they realized that 90% of the information that existed, data that existed in the world in 2017 was generated in the previous 2 years. Now let that sink in for a second. The previous 2 years before 2019, 90% of the data that existed in the world was generated in those 2 years. What does that translate to in very physical terms? It translates into this. It means that by the time that you finish your 4-year degree, what you've learned on your second year is already out of circulation. And there was a study in 2017. Now, if you look at the other latest stat in 2021 around information that's been generated, that looking at the amount of information being generated online, every human being generates 1.7 megabytes of data per minute. Multiply that into billions. You're looking at almost 11.5 billion megabytes of data being generated every minute. That means that change is happening at a rapid rate. If you're not adapting to that change, you're in trouble. About the 5 invisible C's. You can have the visible elements. You can be a highly competent person who has all the skills that are required, who's got high levels of proficiency, and still find yourself with the outcomes that you're not happy with. 2012, 2010, I have this incredible opportunity to be speaking to on my first international stage, Lusaka, Zambia. There are 1,000 people. My spiritual mentor from the US is there. He's the one that felt that, hey, here there's this young African preacher that all of you have to listen to. And then his spiritual mentor is also there. And I'm given 15 minutes to speak. And then my name gets called up and I start feeling that I get up and it was almost like I'm having an out of body experience. I think I greeted them. I'm not even sure. And then I opened my mouth and my brain was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but let's play along. Have you ever had that situation? So I find myself there. I spoke for 15 minutes. I know that there were a couple of amens, and there was an applause at the end. And I wasn't sure whether they're applauding to shoo me off the stage and so out of relief, or whether they were excited about what I shared. But it's it was interesting to me because I had spoken so many different times. But at that moment, I completely got flattened out. And it reminded me of my first audition that I had for television production, where to date, I still don't know what I said. I know that I was there, but I don't remember anything that happened in the room. And it is because of these 5 invisible C's that if you don't get them right, your potential is trapped in this, that you can come across as incompetent even when you are, can come across as having less capacity even when you are. It can take away your energy and make you seem like you are unfit even though you are. It's so crucial for us to understand them. And with that, I'm going to then open up our presentation. And perhaps before I actually start with that, as a working things a bit more engaging, Colleen, can we just have some maybe a question or a thought or two from the audience? Let's try and keep it brief so we can move along, and just share with us what you've picked up so far, and then we'll go on to the presentation.
Yeah, sure. So Avril says a truly inspiring story, Jabu. So thanks for that, Avril. And Lisa, so true. Any comments, any thoughts on what Jabu has shared so far?
You can just mention, for example, what's the one thing that has stuck out for you so far, that maybe connected with you, that you can resonate with.
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Sorry. Hi, it's Lisa from Cape Town.
Hi, Lisa.
So many things. I'm writing as fast as I can, trying to keep up. But I think the thing that you said, if change outside is greater than the change within, you're in trouble. And as a people leader, that's something that I'm very concerned about for my team, helping them to keep up with the pace when they're struggling with, things like flexibility and agility. So I'm not sure if you have any advice on how to inspire people to enjoy change, to find it energizing.
Laptop there going down. Am I still audible?
Yes.
Yeah, you are still audible, Jabu.
Oh, right. I think one of the ways to really put in agility is, let's think about how agility comes in. Agility comes in in sport when you're really physically strong, when you've practiced something over and over and over again, and there's muscle memory, there's body memory, and then you're able to move. Agility has got different elements to it. You can move fast out of the way, you can run fast, you can jump fast, you can jump high, you can be able to do incredible things, acrobatic things in the air. And so it is important that things that are crucial for our success, that we constantly grow. There's got to be a constant growth. So we have to constantly open ourselves up to learn new things. And one of the ways that I develop agility, for example, is that every year I learn something new. I've taught myself piano, I've learned French, I even go as far doing on my Afrikaans since I'm in I've taken on swimming. As a black person, you know, it's like, hey, yeah, I'm not one of those. I cannot swim. I can hold my own in the water. So, and then I learn different things. I learn chess. I'm constantly learning something new to keep my mind agile.
Yeah.
And one of the things, for example, to keep my mind sharp, especially being a speaker, sometimes being a facilitator and having to do strategic sessions and stuff like that, having to be sharp. I do mental exercises. I do those brain exercises. I try to, you know, calculate, for example, from without using a calculator.
Oh no.
And it's just about helping my mind constantly that ability to think quickly in different situations.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that if you have a team that has issue like that, maybe you want to have a plan of introducing different types of skills, either new skills or improvement skills.
Yeah.
You know, you can do a very simple thing, like, for example, what I normally do with my team of motivational speakers. I would find courses online, short little courses, 7-minute thing, or exercises that are sent, and then we'll come back, we'll do them together to see if everybody is, you know, is competent in those kind of things.
Great. Thank you.
Fantastic,
Awesome.
Jabu. Thanks, Lisa. Glenita says adaptability. Glenda Mayton says, know exactly what you meant when you were on stage. Love it when that happens. Ketsiwe says, some nice nuggets already shared. Looking forward to the invisible seas. I do get trapped. And then, Jabu, I see Avril's got her hand up.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Colin, and thank you, Jabu. So, you know, Jabu, just listening to the sort of very powerful introduction already, you mentioned something about competency and getting trapped. And, you know, I'd be interested to hear when you speak about the invisible seas, what it means for, you know, just your competency level changing and where you felt that you were adequate and all of a sudden you're feeling that you're inadequate, you know, within the workspace. So, yeah, you know, there's just been a shift and it makes you feel sort of less worthwhile. So I'd love to just hear your perspective on that. Thank you.
Fantastic. We definitely would be able to answer that question because that is a very crucial and a very common question. All right, I think then we can move on to the presentation, and it's just 5 invisible C's, but I do have 2 extra ones as a bonus for you. All right, is everybody able to see the presentation?
Yes, we can do, Jabu.
All right, fantastic. Okay, now this is the number 2 questions that I get from most adults. I'm sure if anybody is in the space of thought, or as Vusi Tembega says it, if you are a knowledge merchant, this is the question that you're going to get the most from most adults. And that question is that, what must I do? And the second one is, how do I do it? And let's think about it in this way. When we were growing up, when we were born and when we were young and we were learning at a very fast rate, taking on different types of data through our touching, our sensing, our hearing, our touching, our seeing and our feeling, we are learning, and people get excited, right? They get excited when you say our first word, dada, mama, everybody's celebrating, and then you string together your first sentence, and it's all mushed up, and everybody's excited about that first sentence. And then you're asking silly questions, and everybody's like laughing at those silly questions. And then something happens when we start going to school. All of a sudden, you realize that when you open your mouth to ask a question or even to make a statement, is not a very safe thing to do. Why? Because you can be laughed at, because also you can be judged. And then one crucial element of being judged is that we are judged for this one crucial element that makes up our currency as human beings, that makes us feel useful, that makes us needed, feel wanted, and that is intelligence. That our intelligence is being judged whenever we open our mouths. And so now we become a bit more afraid of opening our mouths to ask questions. And another element is this, is that also it can be a reflection of some degree of, you know, our character. That maybe we are asking questions because we are not listening. Maybe we are disobedient. We don't listen. We are disruptive, that's right. And then we get those words that the child is disruptive. They're asking questions all the time. And then you're realizing that actually it is dangerous to open your mouth. It is dangerous to inquire so you can know when you don't know. And then we learn something very, you know, something that is not very helpful for us, and that is that we learn to comply. We learn to look.
Jabu, you've gone on to mute.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, guys, can I ask that nobody mutes anybody on the call, because you've just muted the speaker. So I will monitor who's speaking in between. Please don't mute or do anything online, okay? Thanks, Jabu.
So where did you guys, where did I go?
I think go back in about two sentences.
Okay. All right. So, okay, hold on a second. I need to find my, okay, here we go. Let me go back here. So I was saying that then we realized that it's dangerous to open our mouths, and because we can get judged for our intelligence, and then also we can be judged for our character, and now all of a sudden we are disobedient. And then we learn rather to look out for what to know, and then we start asking people, what must I do? And then we, you know, how do I do it? As opposed to, and that process of learning how to do things which we are constantly engaging on moves into learning what to do. And so then we keep on asking the question what to do. And it's important for us to get back to the point, or to that process of learning how to do. And then this is how we do it. The first thing, the first of our C's here, oh, see, my presentation went funny because I changed it to a different app. So do pardon if it's looking a bit odd. Is confidence. One of the things that happens when we are questioned for our intelligence and we are questioned for our character, we start to doubt who we are. And as you've already mentioned, Errol, is that you are part of that 85%, and I am part of the 85% of the people in the world who struggle with confidence. We struggle to be themselves because we realize that being yourself can actually be costly. Being yourself in speech, being yourself in inquisition, being yourself in curiosity, in the way you dress, in the way you think, in the way that you just are. There's this constant need to comply and to be uniform, to look like the rest of the people is a way of belonging, because when we look the same, we're safe. There's a degree of predictability. And so a strong belief in who you are is a bit, sometimes can destabilize the waters, because then you are an individual who thinks and who has their own desires, who wants to leave home to go in foreign land, who wants to marry outside of the family, who wants to achieve greater than anybody else has achieved, and it kind of destabilizes the water. And that's part of the reason why we have a problem with confidence. It's not necessarily us who have a problem, but it is the fact that our community has a problem with us sticking out because of how the potential of this instability, and then the unpredictability that comes with that, and then the unknown that it creates, and then the chaos that can potentially ensue from that. And then, of course, we all know naturally that when chaos is ensuing, there's a threat in the environment. So psychologically, you're anticipating that something horrible is going to happen. And the worst of the horrible thing happening could be death. And nobody wants to die. So I know it's a dramatic way of putting out what a confident person can make other people feel. But literally, there's a fear that people are going to lose something if the person gets it wrong. That's why it's important then for us to have a strong belief in who we are, and we can have a strong belief in who we are. And then the second part of it is that to have a strong belief in our abilities to perform what we know. And that's why it's important to practice the visible elements to be
proficient in them. And here's another crucial way that kind of transitions into the invisibility. Have a portfolio of evidence of the things that you've done. Most people don't keep a good record of the great things that they have done. The great things that you have done will help to give that assurance of who you are. In the same way that the assurance of who you are will enable you to do even greater things. So there is that symbiotic feeding relationship between a strong belief in who you are and a strong belief in what you can perform. And then there's this thing that holds them together, and that is the body of evidence. The body of evidence, physically speaking. And then here's another crucial element that helps us as well, is also a body of evidence in terms of feedback from the people. Feedback from those who have received, who have been served by your brilliance, by your greatness, by whatever it is that you have done. Listen to them. You know that you've got a problem of keeping a record of great things that you have done when you have discomfort with compliments. When people are complimenting you, how do you feel? Do you immediately dismiss it? Do you feel that you hope that they can just shut up? Then there's something happening in your psyche, something fundamentally in terms of your structure of thinking that is uncomfortable with you receiving positive feedback, which basically means that you are constantly, subconsciously, and even sometimes consciously ignoring your usefulness, ignoring your value contribution, which should then make it harder for you even to speak to your abilities, to speak up for your abilities. And this is what happens when you are incredibly good at what you do, but you don't acknowledge it consciously. And unfortunately, there happen to be certain people around who see that, and they may not necessarily have the moral character to build you up, to mentor you. They will exploit you. You are vulnerable to exploitation. People who don't know their worth are vulnerable to exploitation. Have a strong belief in who you are. Know, authentically speaking, what is uniquely you? What is your authentic intelligence? Do you know that you've got authentic intelligence? And that is the authentic experiences that you have had. That is the authentic, the unique structure that you've got. The authentic, even the dynamic, the combination of places that you have been to, the people that you know, how you've known them, when you've known them. You've got such a unique experience as a person that actually when you think about what you know, the way you know it, how you got to know it, there's uniqueness that gives you authenticity. And when you apply your mind intellectually to process that information, it gives out authentic intelligence. That is for me very exciting, that I can see things and I can say things differently, and I can add to diversity and to the richness of experiences in people's lives because of that. So crucial, confidence. I've mentioned this already. It's a stat that came out in NBC News on 15th of November 2017. Here are some of the ways that you can be able to build the confidence. By the way, Colleen, I'll send you this presentation. I don't mind at all. So if anybody wants to have get a hold of it, they can be able to get a hold of it. The first part is your identity. Who are you? Self-awareness, self-belief, self-acceptance, and that conscious living. Take note of what you're doing well. Take note of why it's well. What are you measuring it against? Standards, is it averages? Are you measuring it against your own expectations, or what is expected of you? Is it KPIs? Is it your peers? There's got to be a degree of measuring what you do, not to compare, but so that you can acknowledge that you are a valuable contributor to your environment, to feel that inherent need of usefulness, significance. The second part is your personality or your personal vision. What long term, right? What is your purpose in life? Not just in terms of your work, but as you do the way you do things. What's your purpose? Where are you headed? What is your impact? What is your significance? On my example, my name is Jabu Zwane, and my mother's name is Mangaka. And it's something that I've contemplated all about. You know, in African culture, names mean something. And I think about those who brought me on earth, when they named me, what was actually the reason? Because it probably holds a clue as to what my significance is. My name is Jabu Zwane, which means rejoice. So I see myself that brings joy and make people rejoice. Number two, my surname is Zwane, which comes from Ukzwana, which basically means to harmonize, to live in harmony. So my name and surname means that the one who rejoices, brings joy to people, to jubilate, and then create that harmony. So I'm constantly aware of that, consciously. And the last thing is, my mother's name is Mangaka. When she was born, she was called the mother of a healer. And she doesn't have, and I'm the eldest son. And in my family, there isn't anybody who's a healer. So then that basically means that I'm the healer. So whenever I speak, whatever I do, whether I'm in the corporate sector, whether I'm in a meeting, whether I'm doing now, in my mind, I'm healing, I'm bringing joy, and I'm creating harmony. So that helps me to live in my own authentic self, and that was I understand that to be me. The third thing is building. It's about your credibility, how you do it. What are your credentials? Listing what you've done helps you with that portfolio evidence. Your degrees and your achievements, your reputation, what people are saying, your competencies. And the last thing is about obviously your character, like why you do it. Like, don't do things that will make you feel bad at night, that will keep you awake at night, that will make you feel like you're less of a human being morally, or whatever way. Have a great character, be self-accountable, self-leadership, have a personal constitution with principle. I believe that your principles are your personal constitution. Then when all else fails, you go to the highest court in the land of you, in the entity of you, you consult with that constitution, and then you override any other judgments that may have been taken preceding that final meeting. And of course, then the courage. All right. Okay, and then the second thing is, you know what, Pauline, let's do this. Because of how, intense this first one was, how about we just quickly take one or two questions or any comments, and then we'll resume from there.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, everybody is resonating with what you're saying, Jabu, and we've got comments of so true, inquiring becomes unsafe for us, authentic intelligence. Oh, there we go. Hi, Colleen, may I please get this presentation? So you've answered that. The ability to accept positive feedback or competition. Avril says powerful. Dipio says definitely. So, I mean, it's just, I think just the way of looking at your name and how that relates and how you show up is just extremely powerful.
They're not going to want to talk.
Sorry, who's not on mute? Sorry, hello. Hi, somebody's not on mute. Buchle. Okay. Dupio? Dupio, did you have your hand up?
Oh yes, I did. Trying to unmute, mute, confusing.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I
Fine.
just wanted to ask, something Jabu spoke, I think that resonated with me was inquiring becomes unsafe for us. And I just wanted to know what steps practical steps that can help us in getting back that safety to inquire.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Dipuo. I have something I call the IT mindset, IT mindset. And the IT mindset is really focusing on what is it that is lacking in my knowledge? What is it that is unclear? What is it that is, for example, if you're doing something as a team that is not being achieved, what is it that is not being achieved? What is it that is causing it? What is it that is being impacted? And then when you start having the it mindset, then your brain starts to give you a different way of framing your questions. For example, As opposed, let's say that you're having a meeting and the thing is that it's getting a bit tense, and you're realizing that emotions are high, things are getting personal. You bring in the it mindset, for example, by saying, okay, guys, what is it that we are not able to achieve when we are this? Your behavior is not helpful to the process, or you're being rude, or so going into the it mindset, number one, it focuses the attention away from us as people to it that needs to be achieved. And then that basically means it helps then the emotions to calm down. So if you're feeling less confident about you as a person, when you focus on the it, the energy moves away from being internalized to being externalized. And so when you're inquiring about the it. What is it that I need to know? For example, I need this type of information so that I can be able to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know that you have explained it to me, but I'm still a bit unclear on it, 1, 2, 3. So the it mindset is very helpful for inquiring, for inquisition, and for getting that information. Normally we and look at how dangerous it is for us. What is it that we're losing, that is being compromised, and then we personalize it, and then in our framing, in our inquiring, we also then become personal. And unfortunately, the moment you confine your inquisition to you limit your scope. You limit your scope. You need to go beyond you and go to it, because the it takes you much further than you can on your own. I hope that helps you. Yes, there you go. You're back.
That's phenomenal. Lorata says, very profound, Jabu. Knowing and being our authentic selves is a superpower, and you have just unpacked that so well.
Oh, that's awesome, Opa.
Any further comments or questions before we move on? Fantastic job. Back to you.
All right. Can we see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
All right. Okay. So then the next C is still is very personal. It still is about us. And then the next C is character. I've already explained that that's your moral framework based on your highest values, principles, and beliefs. What are those? How have you framed those? We've got a problem. One of the challenges, not only in our country, but pretty much everywhere in the world. And when you travel to other parts of the world, and you realize that actually South African problems are not so unique. Perhaps we're a bit more transparent than most countries about some of our dirty laundry. And that is part of the reason why it may appear as if we are one of the most corrupt countries in the world. I can tell you this, pretty much anywhere and everywhere you are in the world, corruption is there. And a big part of that is because many of us are not conscious of our own moral framework. What are your highest values? What are your principles? What are your beliefs? Because there is that relationship there. Whatever you value will determine what you're principled about, and then also determine what you believe, and vice versa. As a believing man who is a Christian, a lot of my beliefs are based on biblical principles of loving your neighbor as yourself, of do unto others as you have them do unto you, of loving a love that is self-sacrificial, that does not seek its own, that is not, for example, suspicious or haughty, but that believes all things, but at the same time that is principle around, the principles of truth. All of these factors make up my beliefs, then make up my principles, make up my values. And so whenever I'm involved in business, people need to know, I want people to get that sense that when I'm dealing with this person, they're highly principled, they're dependable, they're reliable, they're highly competent, they can be able to deliver, and they're not going to betray me. They're not going to, if there is anything between us, they don't have a problem bringing it across. But already, because I've mentioned to you about myself, as a harmonizing person that brings joy and healing. Whenever they communicate with me, it won't be rude, and it will be normally in a way of inquiring. You know, for example, in terms of my own personal character and beliefs, whenever I ask, when I'm confused, I'll say, I'm unclear on something and I need your guidance with it. And I realize that it might just be my own understanding, but please bear with me, for example. Or I'll say, did I hear you correctly when you said this? Or I'll say, can you please just repeat that for me so I can make sure that I don't miss it? As opposed to feeling some emotional energy building up and then I react from that. And that my character builds that moral framework that guides my speech, that guides the way that I do things, that guides the way that I show up in the environment, that guides the way that I want people to feel around me, right? And one of those things that one of those factors I'm very much aware of is that I want people to feel safe around me. It doesn't matter whether they're a small child or whether they're an older person. I'm one of those people that if I am in an environment around me, the aura that exudes from my body has going to be an aura of safety as well. And my character is a crucial part of ensuring that I build that element. Nelson Mandela once said that those who conduct themselves with morality, integrity, and consistency need not fear the forces of inhumanity and cruelty. You know, and this is such a beautiful space to be in, and we know that he embodied that. But I can attest to this reality in terms of some people are very key in my life, and my spiritual mentor mentioned that to you guys before, that he has this motivation to show up as somebody that encourages. He always says to me, Jabu, he's an American, so he says to me, Jabs, there's enough criticism in the world. What most people need is encouragement, and you can never out-encourage anybody. Like, you can never overdose anyone with encouragement. But and this is what human beings need. And so this is what you got to think about. Like, what are your values? How do they show up in the way that you speak, in the way that you do things, in the way that you relate to people, in the way that you perform? Because if you don't have that character, then you're going to have a struggle with the third element, and that element is courage. So you may have all the abilities I've mentioned that are visible, and then you've done some work, and then let's say that you are this incredibly confident person. You show up in the room, and people are feeling like this person is competent, they can deliver the goods. And then you've got that character, reliable, dependable person. But in the world that we're living in, courage is needed. You have to have that motivational conviction to put your fears aside for the sake of your goals, values, and greater good. Your goals, your values, and the greater good. Greater good is outside of you now. It's like realizing that you're part of an ecosystem, that you're part of a living organism in an ecosystem that not only feeds life, but also receives life, also that, conductor. So don't become combustion. No. Yeah, I can't remember the electrical term now. You know, metal is a conductor, but wood is not. I can't remember that electrical term, like where you only receive, but you never pass on. You don't pass on the life that you have received. You know, and part of that is this, in an environment where people are be dishonest, where you can be put in situations where you're having to make, in South Africa, the culture of bribery, for example. Let's say you're a procurement person, and then somebody decides, listen, there's a brown bag, or there's a brown paper bag, or there's a brown bag that's full of interesting goodies. Only if you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need courage to stick to your character, and that's important. But it's very difficult for you to have courage if you don't have a character and if you don't have confidence. And it's also very difficult for you to have courage if you are, in terms of the physical elements of high performance to succeed, you don't have those. They're not very well pronounced. You are easily swayed because you are already feeling lack of confidence because of the lack of competence. A person that is not competent often struggles with having the courage because they don't really know and how good they are. So that motivational conviction to put your fears aside for the sake of your goals. What do you want to achieve yourself, your values? What holds and guides you and put together to ensure that there are certain boundaries that you will not cross, but also that you create those boundaries that people cannot cross around you. Simple example is this, and this is not in any way to slight anyone. You know, oftentimes when I mention to people, whenever I'm traveling, whenever I'm doing facilitation, whenever I'm in public domains, in not a church environment, and I say that I'm a pastor and I speak the way that I speak, you'll find that people start censoring themselves in the way they speak. They'll start apologizing for the F word or the S word, or even sometimes being crude. And I have not necessarily said to anybody, listen, don't swear, don't do that, don't do that. But the presence, because of the way that I conduct myself, and people start saying that. It's in the same way that I've seen also when I'm in the presence of certain people who are highly competent, who are super orderly, who are well put together, and when they open their mouths and they articulate and their thoughts with precision, with accuracy, and they're not condescending, but they are, you know, inviting and collaborative. It kind of then propels you to come also to that very same space, especially if they're the ones that are leading in an environment, whether it's a networking session, whether it's in a work environment, or whether it's in a public space of some sort where everybody's gathered for the same vision. And if this person is a leader and they conduct themselves in that way, then they create the environment where everybody feels propelled to come maybe to the same, it's not necessarily so much to the same level, but to at least hold themselves to a high degree of account. And so that is so crucial. Let's think about it in this way. As Mary Ann, okay, English kind of fails me sometimes in the morning. I'm not going to read that surname now. She says that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again. I will try again. All right. Let's quickly again, before we go on to the last two. How about we then again take a bit of a breather right here. Let's do a bit of processing, a bit of reflection. Questions. What is standing out for you the most? What is the theme that is building up in you? How are you feeling? How are you processing the session so far? And to be conscious about it and to make sure that your entire body gets what you're going through as you're processing it in your mind. So let's take a few more questions or comments again, please, Colleen.
Fantastic, Jabu. So Depura says, thank you. Love that perspective. We are more transparent than most, which means we are more conscious. Labeng says, highly principled. Nina says, insightful talk. Thank you. Glenita says, the use of positive language and reframing our queries. Awesome reminder. And then they just, your question in terms of the word you were looking for, they looked at insulator, conduit, or conductor. So yeah, any further comments from there? Any questions?
No, he said we must come in.
Marie-Louise, I think you've unmuted yourself.
Sorry.
Any other comments or questions for Jabu before we continue? Any thoughts, any other perspectives from what he said? Avril says the timing of the session is so perfect, Jabu.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome.
Any further comments for Jabu before we move on?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, and it keeps coming up for me, that so many people focus on hard skills in quotations and building their skills and those kinds of things, and they fail to develop their EQ or the things that you're talking about here. What are my values? What's important to me? How will I live my life? And so they don't have the character to sustain that leadership promotion, perhaps. And I think it's so important that as you're trying to grow in your career, that you're ensuring that your personal, your soft skills, your character, your values, your beliefs are growing at the same time, so that you have that character to sustain that position that you're hoping to attain.
Yeah. Fantastic. That is so true. I totally agree with that. Awesome. Great contribution.
Thanks, Lisa. Dupur?
Hi, I think for me it's just a comment, and I hopped on very late because my diary didn't even notify me that the meeting was on. But it's just a comment to say thank you for sharing this and for the Business Engage platform, because it's confirming so many things to me, and it's giving me so much confidence, to know that there's still some work that I need to do. There's still some things that I need to do, but that I shouldn't shy away from who I've been created and called to be, but just hone it in such a way that in the end it pleases the one who's called me.
Yeah, that is so fantastic, Dupur. I have this belief that authenticity is the most crucial component of your currency. Like, if you think about currency in that terms, that your authenticity literally is the most crucial. The world we're moving into of AI, where pretty much everything is becoming within reach and can be standardized and people can seem brilliant, but just by use of some device. Authenticity is going to be the distinguishing factor. I believe that the people who are most authentically intelligent, and another is that they have adaptability intelligence, the people who have authentic intelligence, the people also who have identity intelligence. My business partner speaks about that a lot. I listen via identity intelligence. That at the end of the day, those are going to be the factors that actually will make you be distinguished. And there's another word that I think about, another AI. So I said AI, authenticity intelligence, AI, adaptability intelligence. AI also is authentic innovativity. It's a word by a gentleman called Michael Lee. Innovativity means that you're innovative and creative. If you can be authentically innovative and authentically creative, which is going to be the next word we're going to be talking about, those are going to be distinguishing factors. And it's very difficult to be authentically creative and authentically innovative when you are not yourself. Because every single human being has got a unique experience different from the next. All 7 point something billion of us. And that is your framework of authenticity. So thank you. I think we had Lerato also had a hand up.
Yeah, and then also Ritabile, I see your hand's gone down. Have you been covered, or do you still want to pose your question?
Thanks, Colleen. I wanted to say thank you to Jabu for the great insights. But two things just from my side. It's not questions. It's just how what you've spoken about just resonates with me on a personal, professional level, and so forth. The fact that courage doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's just in the smallest ways where you fail at doing something and you pat yourself in the back and just get up again and try again. And also the fact that we always commit ourselves either to our jobs, to other people, to other organizations, but how we don't. I like how you say your principles become your personal constitution. We don't commit ourselves to ourselves. So we commit to other things, to other people, other activities, but we never really have a personal commitment to ourselves, not to fail ourselves with certain, goals, objectives, and so forth. But how we get very good at achieving it, if it's an organization, if it's someone else's, if we promise someone, but how we often fail ourselves in doing that. So That was just my, sort of like my aha moment there. So thank you very much for that.
Awesome, awesome. It actually triggered a thought as you were speaking there, that it's one of those principles also that I live by, is that the more you betray yourself, the less you trust yourself. The more you go against your own values and principles, the less you trust yourself. You create incongruence in your entire being, and you begin to fall apart. So it's important that, again, to commit, as you allow the word you use, that you could personally commit to you, committing to your values, so you can create that congruous, and then there can be more trust. And the more you trust yourself, the easier it is then for you to be confident and to have character and to be courageous. I think Lerato still had a hand. You can please go ahead if you're ready now.
Good morning, Jabu. It's Lerato. How are you?
I'm all right, and you, Lerato?
All right. So I've noted something in corporate. When you spoke about our purpose earlier and our competence and credibility, I've noted that, someone could be competent and have the credentials to do a role that they do, but following some organizational changes, maybe people are put in different roles, they then lack the self-belief and perhaps also not perform as optimally, even though they still have the credentials to and the competencies to execute on that role. What could that be attributed to, in just the talk that you've spoken about?
Okay, well, that's a very deep question. One that is actually very, very important to answer, actually. Thank you. Now, let's think about it in this way. All of us, or as human beings, we are pattern, we are people, we are beings of pattern. We build those structures, and those structures create patterns, and they're crucial things to that. One of them, as I've mentioned before, is familiarity. I'm not mentioning this here, but there's familiarity. Familiarity helps us to engage with our environment in a way that is more predictable. When things are predictable, we can plan, and when we can plan, then we feel more in control. So ultimately, all of us are trying to have that control. We're trying to create an environment that is familiar, so that we can predict potential outcomes, so that we can plan, so that we can be in control. So when there's a structural change in the company, and then you are shifted from one portfolio to the next, number one, it puts you in an unfamiliar environment, which means things become less predictable, which means you can plan less, and that means that you have less control. With the moment you have less control, you go into that state of a bit of panic where you're realizing that potentially it's danger. What's the danger? Danger is potential failure. So you're going through that process, and that's why then you start to then retreat into your corner and feel a little bit less confident. And so that's normal. But there's a way to deal with that. And another important part that happens is this. Unfortunately, in terms of the culture of corporate, the way that we understand the path of promotion, we normally see ourselves being promoted by going up, not lateral. Lateral move could mean different things. Unless it has been well articulated that your lateral move is based on your proficiencies and the gaps that are in that particular portfolio you're moving into, that is compatible to your skills, it's very difficult for you to feel confident about it, because it feels like basically you've been pushed out of the way more than actually being pushed forward in the way. So we're expecting a way up as opposed to expecting a way to the side. So we have that element also that is messing up a little bit with your own sanity. Normal that you're feeling a bit less confident. So to start again from scratch is this: you got to be a child again, right? You got to realize I'm in an environment that I don't know. However, I've got a bit of my competencies and my history as a competent, well-achieving person. Remind yourself again that you've been through this kind of situation before. What is the process? Openness to learn. Integrate the lessons that you're putting up. that you have learned, apply them over and over again until you are more competent about it. Make it about the it again. The moment you make it about you, about the fact that, oh, I have been, put on the side, and it's very likely that you're just going to start looking down on yourself, start thinking that you are being demoted, and start showing up not as yourself, but as a lesser version of yourself. But the moment you say, I did well in my previous portfolio because I'm a highly competent person, and reminding yourself of that, and then just accepting that, naturally speaking, realistically speaking, based on human limitation, whenever you start anything new, you're like a little child. Why? You've got less awareness. Why? Because you've not been exposed to the situation. That basically means that you don't have enough information. Even though you may be the most brilliant, intelligent, with a high IQ, your IQ is dependent on how much information you've got, and how fast you can get new information, and how quickly you can be able to collate that information and then use it for what you want. So go through the process of learning, be a child again, go through the process of exploration and inquisition and discovery, and enjoy the ride. Don't make it about you as a person, but make it about make it about the process of growing. And then you'll find that actually your process of transitioning into a new role is much faster, because you're not focusing on you, but you're focusing on the it, and then what do you need? What is the it that you need to do to fill in the gaps of knowledge? I hope that is helpful to you.
Awesome, thank you.
Great. All right, Colleen, we'll move on to the next. We'll move on to the next part of the presentation.
Thanks, Jabu.
And wrap it up. Cool. Let me just quickly open this up and. Okay. All right, presentation visible to everybody. Okay, hold on. That's not the right one. Let me go back. Oops. Stop presenting. Okay, I need to make sure that I'm on the right tray. Here we go. All right, thank you. Thanks for your patience. Okay, the next one is then consistency. Now we're moving from ourselves, and then we're starting to look at, something outside of ourselves. Consistency is about that, your ability to apply yourself to achieve the best predictable outcomes, most of the time aligned with your aims, aligned with your goals, aligned with the goals of whatever you have. So it's that ability. Remember we started off by speaking about the visible elements of your performance, which are the abilities that you need to have to achieve your goals or to achieve your aims. But now is that how can you apply those consistently over a period of time to create those predictable outcomes, most of the time aligned with your aims? Because really, I believe that consistency is that strongest link in the chain of success. That if you don't have consistency, then you have those patterns where you're going up, you're going down. Today you're great, tomorrow you're not. And if you don't practice, it's very difficult for you to be consistent. Let's look at the most practical way of then becoming consistent. And again, pardon the jumpy words because of the movement from my Canva to the point, then kind of messed it up a little bit. Here we go. The first part of consistency is that there are activities that you've got to practice regularly, systematically, in a timed manner, and in a way of measurement. So the activities. What are those activities that you've got to perform? As a speaker, for example, I know that in certain stages, unlike today where I'm having the time of my life because I've got 2 hours, this doesn't happen a lot. Whenever you're called in to come and do a keynote, you've got 25 minutes, you've got 30 minutes, you've got 15 minutes in certain situations. And that means that I've got to even know how many minutes I speak, how many words I speak per minute. I know that when I'm in my A game, I run something around 150 to 160 words per minute. So if I'm drafting a speech, that's a 15-minute speech, and I want to allow a bit more room for creativity and authenticity, I've got to reduce my words per minute down to 13 minutes to give myself a 2-minute room for a bit more flexibility. But I cannot be able to do that if I don't practice regularly. It's not a lack of competence. If I don't practice very well, and I say this to my children all the time, I always say to my kids, have you done your best? And part of doing your best includes practicing. It includes doing something multiple times over and over again, especially if it is something that you know is crucial for achieving your goals. Another thing, for example, that I often talk about is that the fact that I'm a non-native English speaker. I'm Jabu Zwane, who grew up in the Free State as Mosotho, speaking Sesotho. So my Zulu is a bit wonky. I speak more Sesotho, which is a combination of Sesotho and isiZulu, than I do speak isiZulu. But when I speak English, obviously it's not my native language, and sometimes there can be that struggle to explain certain difficult concepts which were not part of my upbringing when language was being formed. They were not part of my upbringing. I come from a small town. I come to the city and everything is big and the culture is different. Everything from greeting to walking into the public spaces and, so what is, some of the norms and standards. And now all of a sudden you're learning these new things, let's say in the space of thought in corporate sector. And there's so many concepts that are so foreign to my foundational space. But not only that, they don't even have any structural form in my formative language. And now all of a sudden I'm going to be having to express these things in English. First of all, it's not my mother tongue, and then secondly, it's also a bit intimidating given my history as a Black South African, where speaking both Afrikaans and English was not so much an expression of communicating what's in my mind as what language is, but actually was even a measure of my own intelligence. So as you can already see, there's already a tension there where I'm worried about, so many different elements that have got nothing necessarily to do with my competencies. So to overcome that, I constantly improve on my vocabulary. I'm not a good reader, but I'm good with audio. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks, I listen to a lot of podcasts. If I'm writing an exam on a particular thing, I would actually rather find an audio version of the book to listen to it, and I can make notes that way because I'm a visual and artistic person. That helps me then to learn, because that's how I learn. And with my kids, one of my kids is like that, is like me. And so then that's how I taught him then to learn. So practice the activities that make you brilliant. What makes you brilliant? What makes you you? Some of you may not notice this, but actually I have a little bit of a stutter. I was stuttering from a very young age, and every now and then in certain environments, that stuttering can happen, especially if my brain is struggling to put together the thought that I want and I'm feeling a bit nervous. But I've practiced how to overcome that. As a communicator, for example, I know that there are certain English words that if I'm going to say them, I might just fumble them. One of those words is, for example, recognize. If I don't take that deep breath before I say recognize, I don't say it very well. Consistency is crucial, and you cannot be consistent if you don't know, or rather, if you're not consistent, you will not be able to see the gaps in your abilities, and therefore you will not necessarily even know how to overcome those gaps or embark on any process of transformation to overcome those gaps. Second part is about discipline. Discipline being those laws of self-accountability. It's about following a schedule. It's about self-control. It's about, as you mentioned earlier on, commitment. And it is also about hard work. Like, are you accountable to yourself when nobody's looking? I always say this to some of my mentors and people I coach. Are you making yourself more moneyable? Are you improving on your skills, or are you still running on the skills from last year when ChatGPT has just been released a couple of months ago, and and young people are learning so much more about technology, And some of your skills are going to be soon outdated because they can be easily be performed by a robot. How are you improving your skills so that you can be more secure in your own accountability, your own authenticity? And the last one is in this part here is patience. It's about that delayed gratification. Patience is about time, right? It's about understanding how to delay your wanting to have the results, not being, this popcorn type of person. And to do that, you have to have already mentioned earlier on, like you have to have emotional intelligence, know how to self-regulate, endure the growth process, and of course, be outcome oriented. Focus more on the outcome. Before you criticize yourself, ask yourself this: are the activities that I'm performing leading to the outcomes that I desire? If they're not, then where do they fall off? Is it me? Is it external? Is it someone else? Is it something else? And then you start to go back and then fix that. If you focus on the outcomes, as opposed to focusing on how you feel, as opposed to focus on what you may fear, for example, then you can be patient. And patience, of course, is about that attitude. So consistency is crucial. Practicing those activities, being disciplined in the laws that you put for yourself, and then being patient as you go along doing what you're doing. And then the fifth one is then creativity. And creativity then is your ability to think outside of the norm, explore and find possibilities beyond what is known. And as I already mentioned, I believe that creativity actually is crucial for us going forward. And it is important that we allow ourselves sometimes to entertain our crazy ideas and see whether they're plausible or not. And if they're not, then of course reserve the right to repent, and to change our minds about them. But if we don't allow ourselves, if we don't sit in a space to entertain some of the crazy ideas and wonder whether they can be able to work or not, then we stump our own growth process. Because it is, and also we don't learn to be courageous. It's okay for us to explore. It's okay for us even to explore to make that mistake. And I think that creativity is crucial. How do you then cultivate creativity? Try things outside of your comfort zone. Say, for example, have you ever tried drawing as opposed to saying I'm not a very good drawer? Have you ever tried singing? Have you ever tried being involved in some kind of a dance, even though you may have two left feet? Maybe the two left feet can at least be able to, walk in rhythm parallel to each other. You don't always have to quit, strip on yourself. What other creative things are there within your environment that you are afraid of exploring because you're saying, well, I'm not a very creative person. I don't like this and I don't like that. And you know what? Sometimes some of the things that we don't necessarily like, maybe the very same things that allows us to open those doors of creativity in our minds. Ever tried playing games with your children, for example? I do that a lot. I learn a lot about creativity. Sometimes we compete about different little things that allows me to, with my creativity. What about learning different new apps that are currently in circulation that eventually would actually replace some of the apps that we're currently using? As I've mentioned already, I use Canva to create this. Unfortunately, I didn't do what I normally do, which is check to see whether everything is aligned. But as opposed to using PowerPoint, there are many different types of apps that you can use that are a little more creative, that can allow you to make your presentation a little bit more interactive and colorful. What is it that you keep on telling yourself that you're not good at, that you cannot do, but it's got more to do with you being in a comfort zone than it has to do necessarily with the thing itself? How many times do you discourage yourself from stepping outside of what you know to explore what is potentially out there, to expand your mind. Because creativity is a state of, yes, it is an ability, but at the same time, our brains are waiting, because creativity is that imagination, right? And that's what Einstein says. He says this, that creativity is intelligence having fun. Like, does your intelligence have fun? Or is it stuck up in some kind of a framework and it cannot, once you put your intelligence in that box, you find a way to be comfortable in that box and you cannot expand outside of that box. We all know of all the companies that have, that have died down because they would not allow creativity or intelligence to have fun in their companies. And they decided rather to confine intelligence to certain boundaries, which in the end made them redundant and irrelevant. So before I give you the two last bonus points, let's take a little bit of a breather here quickly again. Questions, comments? Colleen, back to you.
Jabu, Glenita says, this principle reminds me of a talk someone delivered in terms of marriage. I went home and informed my husband, boyfriend at the time, he needs to be consistent with his gestures, like opening the car door, buying flowers, etc. And I'll be this reminder. To practice consistency, we require an accountable buddy to remind us of what we are committed to. I think that's quite interesting. Hopefully, awesome. I don't have to remind my husband that he's going to buy me flowers. I love your vulnerability because you're brilliant and some people might think you're lucky. You're just like that. But admitting you get nervous or have to practice makes us feel it is possible for us. And just one thing for me that really resonated was this thing that, because especially as women, we shy away from things that we're not proficient at. And because we don't want to be labeled as incompetent or cannot do or be shamed or whatever. So I thought it was so powerful that the things you're not good at may open up areas of creativity in your life. Very powerful, Jabu. And then I see there's a hand. Bukhle.
Hi guys, how's everyone doing?
Great, Bukhle, you.
Great. So I like what Jabu speaks about, and he speaks about creativity and trying out new things and so forth, because I'm 35 this year. I learned how to ride a bicycle last year and I ended up cycling. And it took me about 2 days how to learn a bicycle. And then I ended up joining a cycling group. And yeah. And then another thing that I also did for myself when I was 25, I learned how to swim. And I ended up swimming as a sport. And how I was able to do all of these things is the swimming part was the company that I used to work for at that time encourages to do a lot of sport. So it was actually nice that we were actually encouraged to do sport. We were given time to do sport. And then now I joined this company, which is not really much, they don't really encourage you to do sport. Like it's something that you do obviously outside of like your 9 to 5 and all these things. But I also feel that, so what I want to just say is that I feel like because I'm new in this company, I'm fairly new, I feel like it's something that I would like to introduce in the company, where we encourage our colleagues to do sport, encourage them in a way that they don't feel embarrassed or it's not competitive or no one feels like they're not doing enough and so forth. How would I go about doing that? How do I go about going to my seniors and saying, I've got this idea where we form a group and we just encourage people to try a new sport, try tennis. I've heard people in the office say that they want to try tennis. You ask them like 4 months later, have you tried it? No, not yet. I hear people in the office say that they would like to run their first 10Ks. You ask them, have you done it in like 6 months? Nah, not yet. But then I've got this idea that sits with me and say that I want to now introduce this thing whereby I at least encourage people to go after their personal goals in their lives. But then it's an office environment, but it's not competitive. No one feels embarrassed. no one feels shamed, because I know that people sometimes feel like if I run a 10Ks in like 2 hours and I share with you guys, it's a bit embarrassing, you know. So how do I go about doing that?
That's a great question. Colleen, any thoughts?
Oh, I guess as the Women's Forum, they need to look at that and see how they can do it. I was just thinking about Buchle's story, and I remember they brought a netball team. They were going to start a netball team in Lone Hill. And I thought, gee, you know, I was so good at school. You know, I played center and I was fit and everything. And this was about 6 to 8 years ago. And I decided to enroll because I thought, well, you know, I used to be good at netball. I think my daughter sat on the edge of the field. She was in hysterics. I think I lasted about 10 minutes around all the younger people. So I think it just depends on who you are as to whether you would do it in groups or something like that. But I'm sure it's something that Buchle, if you go back to your Women's Forum, I'm sure that there's an opportunity for you perhaps to discuss it there. Loretta, I see your hand.
Yeah, so Cole, other teams have actually started it as part of, you know, what would replace your typical old team building. You actually do a sporting event. So some teams have started it that way. And I see some of them also doing it over weekends. It doesn't even have to be during work. So those that actually end up doing it on a Saturday morning, we've got netball teams, we've got soccer teams. It's part of their team building initiatives and activities. So even if it's an afternoon or morning, but that's how it normally starts. My team have taken up hiking. We do it as part of wellness. We just recently started, and it's in our calendars for every month. So just identifying what will work for the team. The younger ones in the core center environments have chosen netball, and they do commit to it. So that's how the movement starts. Small, but then it becomes a big based on what you identify will work for the team. So very possible.
Fantastic. And then also, Buchle, there's some comments in the chat. It's you start a social club in a corporate way, or it can also be done, as Loretta says, through your employee wellness. You know, also, I think a great sport which so many people are taking up now is also paddle. And there's so many paddle courts starting up all over the place that I'm sure that there would be something that you can have a look at and have something close by to where you're based. Does that answer your question, Buchle?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
Fantastic,
Thank you.
fantastic. Okay.
Sorry, if I can just add, Colleen.
Yeah, Lisa.
You know, this whole idea of being courageous and vulnerable, and sometimes we have to lead by example. I remember as a team building, they did bubble soccer, and so many people weren't signing up because I think they felt they'll look stupid or whatever. But I was so keen, and I'm one of the oldest people in my office. And I was out there in the bubble, and I was being tackled by people and knocked over, and I just kept getting up and like it was so much fun. But it also encouraged other people. Okay, if Lisa's okay with looking silly or having fun or, you know, being bashed around, then I can also do it, you know. And sometimes we have to be the ones who put ourselves out there so that the rest of the team feels comfortable. And my team won, by the way.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. Yeah, and it's just a start. I mean, even if you don't have a big group together, you know, I always say, instead of talking about something, just start it. So even if it's 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 people, start it, and you'll actually find that, you know, as word goes out, you'll actually grow it from there. So often it doesn't need to be something huge, but just start it anyway, even if it's 2 of you. Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. That's a brilliant question. When I was still in corporate, what I started at a company I used to work for, Outsurance at the time, we started a basketball league. We started a basketball league for professionals, and quite a few of us actually started that. Started going through that, and the next thing you know, the company decided to build a court. And I think now they've got even more other sports and other stuff that they're doing that people can be able to do. So that's a brilliant one. It can be done in that way. All right, then guys, let me give you the 2 bonus C's. The 2 bonus C's. Let's say that you've done everything so far, right? So you have, you've been amazing. You have all the competencies, you're confident, you have the character, you are courageous, you are consistent, and also you're creative. But the thing is, that's still you. That's still you on your own. And you can only take yourself so far. I'm sure some of you, many of you have heard the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And then here, this is about them going together. So then the next 2 C's are about that. It's about leveraging what you have in the environment and not just putting everything on your own shoulders by yourself and think that it's me against the world, right? And the C is collaboration. We heard it before, and that is your ability then to connect, to create with, to build with others for the common purpose. Because then when you're building together, you can leverage the wisdom in the room, the intelligence in the room, the vast experiences in the room. And then to be able to collaborate with other people, you've got to be able to have relationships with other people. All right. There's a saying that I once read, I think it was by Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie said that you can spend 2 years trying to get people interested in you, but you can spend trying to get people to interested in you, but you can spend 2 months being interested in people and they'll all become your friends. So if you are interested in people, people feel safe with you and they're okay, they feel accepted by you, and then they will feel they will be your friend, as opposed to constantly trying to show people your point of view all the time. One of the skills that I believe I have is that skill of curiosity, is the skill of asking questions. Like, what do you mean? How did you achieve that? Tell me a bit more about your own process, because I can see that you've done this very well. So being complementary with people, and for example, is one of the ways of creating collaborative, great collaboration teams. Being complementary to your team, being specifically complementary to your team, and being curious about what their own processes is. It brings their consciousness, it awakens them to their own brilliance, and then they can feel that they feel that brilliance around you, then they want to be around you and they want to collaborate with you, and literally pretty much in everywhere you go, they'll go with you. And I learned this a lot when I was still a pastor at the time, is that I've traveled to 18 different countries, and every single time that I would travel, every time that people hear, okay, I'm traveling to this country, there'd normally be a group of 7 or 8 people that constantly would want to go and travel with me, and I wouldn't necessarily even have to invite them. They'll just invite themselves and drag themselves along, and then they become my support structure, and they become my collaborative team. Even now that I'm in business, pretty much anywhere and everywhere that I travel, I would have 1 or 2 or 3 young people around me, again, as a way of not only collaborating, but also mentoring. In terms of in my business right now, there are probably about 3 or 4 different companies that I'm collaborating with, that we share ideas with, that we share opportunities with, that we share our experiences with, and we build that collaborative ecosystem where I don't always have to feel alone. Think about this effect for a second. The levels of loneliness have risen, and they've risen even much higher post-COVID-19. Pre-COVID-19, already they were saying that in the UK, the levels of loneliness among 62-year-olds or among 18-year-olds is the same as the levels of loneliness among 62-year-olds, which basically means that isolation has become pretty much the norm these days. And so people are finding it more and more difficult, more and more scary to relate with other people. It's important that you create your relatability or your relational index, your relational currency, your relational competency, whatever you want to call it. Are you comfortable talking to people? If you're not, why? What is it that you fear? What is it that you think will happen? Has it happened? Was it when you were a child? Was it when you were a teenager? Is it happening when you were an adult? If it's happening when you were an adult, what is it that you haven't learned? Have you learned to speak up for yourself? How do you communicate? Have you learned to have boundaries? How do you communicate them? Do you have principles? Are you clear on them? How do you speak up for your work? How do you speak up for your abilities? How do you speak up for yourself? Makes it easier for us to collaborate and not fear being taken for granted if we are comfortable in our own skin, comfortable in our own skills, comfortable in our own history, comfortable in our own abilities. And then we can create the same space, and then you are a brilliant person then to collaborate with when you're like that. And then the last one that I want to talk about then is this crucial one, is communication. To collaborate, you have to have good communication skills. That's your ability to interrogate your own motives, formulate and articulate your ideas with clarity for a purpose. Look at how I said that it is about ability to interrogate your own motives. What you communicate from your motives. You communicate from your motives. You communicate from your fears. You communicate from your desires. You communicate from what you want to achieve. You communicate from your concerns. You communicate from your things like your trauma. That's why you need to practice interrogation of your motives. What is informing your motives? And then once you've interrogated your motives, have a purpose, formulate your thoughts, articulate your ideas with clarity for a particular purpose. Here's one of the ways that you build your communication. Stop saying that I'm not a very good communicator. Your brain is a program. The moment you say I'm not a very good communicator, that's what you're programming in your mind. Then you don't become a good communicator. Say things like, I've got gaps in my communication abilities, and then why? Figure out why. I've got gaps in my communication abilities because of my lack of confidence, because of my lack of experience, because of my lack of exposure, because of my lack of familiarity in certain environments. There is a reason why you are unable to communicate your ideas with clarity, succinctly, precisely in different environments. You don't just become unable to communicate. And part of the reason why sometimes it's become so hard for us to communicate is what I've already mentioned earlier on. That unfortunately communicating somewhere along the way in our upbringing shifted from not only the process of learning, of inquisition, of expressing inquiry, curiosity, and also expressing what is on our mind, but rather now becoming a dangerous state where we can be judged for our intelligence, we can be judged for our competencies. And I was invited last night to go and speak to the Gibbs alumni. They started an alumni speakers network at Gibbs, and then they asked me to come and give them a technical workshop on how to handle the stage. And I made this example that when you are a communicator, for example, let's say as a leader, there are certain psychological things that happen. One of the things that happens is that we know that when we gather together as human beings, when we come together, there are reasons for that. And one of the reasons that we come together is crisis. There's a crisis. There's something that needs to be achieved that is important, that is crucial, that is urgent. And then the person that is in the front is probably the person that knows how to get us out of that, or at the very least can help us to facilitate the process of getting out of that. So you imagine yourself in this valley between these massive mountains, the mountain of judgment and the mountain of crisis. There's crisis, and there are people also judging. They're judging you are there in the middle, you are the one that is the leader, and they're all behind you on this river going to the other side. And then you are the only one sometimes that knows how to get to the other side. And if you show any kind of hesitancy, chaos ensues. If you open your mouth and you create chaos, if you open your mouth, you create confusion. If you open your mouth and you add to the tension, you add to the emotional highs, then things get really, really crazy. And so we should be petrified of, for example, public speaking, if you're a public speaker. In the same way, sometimes also we have to be petrified of our communication, because once our thoughts leave our minds through our mouths and they go into the atmosphere, they no longer belong to us. We don't determine what's going to happen to them. There was another great communicator, T.D. Jakes, that said that That's why speaking is scary, is that once thoughts they leave your mouth and they land in people's brains into the atmosphere, you don't decide what's going to happen to them. And that is why, therefore, it is crucial that you understand what makes it hard for you to communicate your ideas. And then work on those gaps. What makes it easier? Then you create that environment. What makes it easier for me before, for example, I come and do this type of presentation with you guys, I take deep breaths. I remind myself that I am a good communicator, that I've done this multiple times before. And I imagine at the end of the presentation, everybody being happy with what they've heard and the goals being achieved. And I focus my mind on creating that kind of environment and making myself comfortable, breathing, giving myself breaks. If I make a mistake, I'm a human being, I get it. I can call it out. I don't have to worry about what somebody thinks about the mistake that I've made. If I have to own up, I own up to it. And so own your thoughts, own your values, own your competencies, own your history, own your credibility, own the space that you've been trusted with to be the one that leads, to be the one that brings order, that brings healing, that brings understanding, that brings clarity, that communicates in simplicity some of the most complex ideas. Understand the art and the science of how things work. Science being the standardized, the unchangeable, the more common, the more repeatable, predictable, consistent way of doing things, and the art being the more the chaos, the unpredictability, the subjectivity of being a human being, where you are in your own subjective selves and you don't even know how you feel even today, and then something could happen that is unpredictable, that exists in the world, and then to be able to marry the two together is very helpful. There's a whole course that I do around communication, understanding what is the science of communication and the science and the art and the science, because we live in that world, live in the world of science, and we live in the world of art, and it is the merging of the two. And just the way of playing with words here is that there is that there is that symbiotic symmetry between art and science, that there's an axis where everything comes together. In the same way, also there's a symmetry, there's symbiotic symmetry between the physical elements of success in terms of activities that you've got to perform, but there's 7 invisible seas that you have shared, and you've got to find that meeting ground. Because if you don't find that, then your potential is trapped in that. And your potential is that sum total of all your performance components working together in a compatible environment to help you to achieve your goals. There's so much that I've said, and I think with this, I just want you to really think about that again. Confidence, character, courage, consistency, collaboration, communication. Use this framework to build your own. Look at, when you see the presentation, look at what some of the components are for confidence. Work on that. Character, it's very personal to you. Courage, personal to you. Consistency, there's a model that I've already given there. Work on that. Unfortunately, I didn't put everything in there, but use your ChatGPT to learn different skills of collaboration, of communication, of creativity. But put yourself, if you will, for the next month under some kind of a plan, maybe a couple of months, to work on these 7 C's on your own time. And I promise you, I guarantee you, your life, your outlook on life, the way you're experiencing your life, the way you're showing up for yourself at work will look very different in the next year. So that's the end of my presentation. We'll just take a Q&A and then wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Well, Jabu, this has been extremely powerful and yeah, very timely, as you said. Absolutely phenomenal. I think, just the amount of wealth of knowledge and that type of thing. I mean, I was also trying to write down furiously as you were speaking, but I'm sure as many of us, we're going to be going back and back and back on the on the presentation to actually go through some of the nuggets you shared. So really appreciate you spending time with us this morning. Any last minute questions, comments for Jabu? My phone's going, so I'm sure there's lots of comments going, and I'm hearing this beep in my Avril says, Jabu, what a life-changing delivery of your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your heart. Renee says, so many nuggets of wisdom, would need to listen to it again to absorb everything. Lisa, definitely need to listen a few more times. Quite insightful. I mean, everybody has just loved the session, Jabu. It's been such a wonderful 2 hours. I just want to see, I think there's some hands going up. Lebogang, can you unmute yourself and just ask Jabu the question or comment?
Okay, good morning. Morning everyone, morning Jabu. Okay, first of all, thank you for a fruitful session. I think my question to you is, what is your why? What is your why in life, based on everything that you've been sharing and all this knowledge that you've been imparting throughout the day? So I think I'm curious to know, what is your why? What keeps you going? Yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
I think is this relief of torment. I grew up my life being tormented. I was tormented by so many different things, the trauma in my life, and I realized that as a pastor, people carry a lot of torment. They're feeling torture. You know, this lack of acceptance, being undermined, not being regarded. It makes you feel so horrible. You know, it's a whole different. Colleen knows a bit more about my story, but so much rejection I felt. You know, and I'm like, this thing I'm thinking, but I'm a good person. Why are people so weird, mean to me? And I realized that, you know, when you're tormented, also then you give out what you have inside of you. And so my own healing now is that I want to heal people from that torment. And I then use different ways. I use things like that. Corporate, yes, it's what people do. How do you get rid of that torment while you are making money for your family? When you are making a change in the community, how do you adjust your mind so that you can experience the hardship of your life that you can do nothing about differently and not be so, go through torment, but also still going through the difficulties? And that's my why. Honestly, it's about the relief of torment. That's why I mentioned earlier on that my mother's name is Mangak, which means that the mother of a healer, and I see myself as such.
Okay, thank you. Wow, okay.
That made me experience my life differently.
Yeah, sure. Jabu, Avril says, do you have podcasts that we can listen to?
Yes, I do. I haven't done many of them lately, but I do quite a lot of short videos on TikTok. You know, 1 minute, 90 seconds. I do a lot. TikTok, I do 3 or 4 videos a day. So you can get a lot there. But if you go on Anchor FM or even Google Podcasts and look for Mindset Talk is one word together, Mindset Talk, and then you'll find me there. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, feel free to share my LinkedIn details with them, Colleen, as well. I'm on LinkedIn. I do put quite a lot of stuff on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And then just a reminder that for those that joined us late, so that this talk will be on the Business Engage YouTube channel. So you're welcome to go and listen and listen to it again. Lisa says we can listen and be inspired, but we must apply. So I love your challenge to put ourselves under plan to grow the 3 C's. And then Alta says, that is so powerful, Jabu, helping others to get over what you have been through. Very, very powerful session. Extremely powerful. We've got a minute left. Any other quick comments? Anything you want to share with Jabu? Fantastic. No, Jabu, once again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I mean, you know, just so much wisdom in this 2 hours. And Unfortunately, we haven't actually made it 4 hours. Otherwise, I'm sure we could have actually all been sitting on the edge of our seats listening to you. I really appreciate the time you have taken to be with us this morning. And I must tell you, Jabu's had quite a hectic time, backwards and forwards to Cape Town and, you know, all the rest of the presentations he's been doing. So it's been 2 weeks, and to show up and to really just give your all for this morning, we really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. It is what energizes me. It is what gives me life. It is what gets me to get up every morning. And I want to thank you once again, Colleen, for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I'm glad that it worked out in a way that it seems from the feedback that everybody got something helpful for them. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Super. Just in closing, everybody, please remember the entries for the Gender Mainstreaming Awards. They close on the 31st of May. You don't have to have a company entry in order to nominate individuals. So anyone within your network that is showing up in gender mainstreaming, a positive role model, or somebody that's sponsoring others up the ranks, please do think of nominating them. The more stories we tell, the more we can do. So really appreciate it if you could go onto genderawards.com and go and submit your entries. Thank you all for being with us this morning. Have the most awesome day and keep warm. And we'll see you on the 26th of May for the next session with Kirsten Landman. Have an awesome day, everybody. Thanks so much, Jabu. Bye-bye now.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
Chas.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.